Brendan, it's all yours. Thanks very much, Pete, and thanks, Paul. And look, it's great to now follow on from the gems that Paul has given us about the board and start talking about that key role that they have in directing the CEO. When we look at a board of directors or a management committee, and Paul mentioned it, that key line down the bottom there of the phrase that we use is NEFO, noses in and fingers out. And part of that we're going to talk about now, about what the role of the CEO is and how that relationship should work. There's a great quote there from Don Mercer from the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and it says, "The board has one function above all others, choosing, evaluating, and if necessary, changing the CEO." This is one of the most important functions. So it's a critical understanding of all this, that when we start to talk about the role of the CEO is critical in the success of any organisation, and clear direction and supervision by the board is absolutely vital, ensuring that we have a successful organisation. What can go wrong? And there are lots of things that can go wrong if that relationship's not right, and we've seen plenty of them, I'm sure, along the way. Directors wanting to be too hands-on and really have their fingers in the organisation, not just their noses. Excuse me. Lack of information from the CEO can cause mistrust sometimes, and that can force directors to actually go looking if they feel they're not getting enough information. Rushed, incomplete, or poor quality reporting by the CEO. Lack of financial accuracy and delegation process. If those aren't in place, that starts to make organisations nervous. Directors communicating directly with staff, usually a no-no. There are some circumstances, obviously, where that's encouraged to happen, but we don't want them going behind the CEO's back. And decisions that are deviating from the strategic plan. So why have we gone and done something that wasn't actually part of our strategic plan? And then the big one, the lack of performance expectations and CEO review processes. If those aren't in place and the CEO doesn't really know what's expected of him or her, and there isn't a review process, it's very difficult for them to actually do their job properly. The key tools in directing the CEO, the big one, of course, and my number one is the strategic plan. This is the CEO's Bible. This determines what his or her focus is and how the organisation is travelling. Governance policies and procedures, and Paul mentioned there things like the board charter. These also include how the relationships work between CEOs and boards and who does what, and really clarifying those roles and responsibilities. The delegation register, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in today's discussion, and the reporting mechanisms. And of course, the performance review. So what is the role of the CEO? The governance structure should show a clear separation of powers and responsibilities between the board and the CEO and the staff. Now, normally the CEO wouldn't be a director of the board. Obviously, they attend board meetings, but they wouldn't normally be a director. This enables and supports a clear separation of that power between the board and the management team. However, there are some organisations that the CEO is a director. In that case, there should be clear policies in place to ensure the distinction between management and the board exists. The organisation should have clear mechanisms in place that, as a minimum, prevent the CEO from being involved in remuneration decisions, obviously, and continuing as a director beyond their appointment as chief executive, and of course, not being able to hold the position of chair. The CEO is the link between the board and the management and staff. The CEO is present at board meetings to provide information and advice to the board on the operations of the organisation and to understand the direction provided back to him or her by the board. The CEO ensures that all programs and services are aligned to the strategic plan and is responsible for the development of all the operational policies. The management team and staff are responsible for delivering the strategic plan and take their direction from the CEO. The CEO employs the staff and ensures their conditions are fair, safe and dignified, ensures written personnel policies that make clear rules for staff and protect them against unfair practices are in place, and provides guidance, feedback and regular review of staff performance. Now let's talk about the linkage then between the CEO and the board, and ideally how that should work. We've said before the CEO is appointed by the directors and holds that office and on the terms and conditions and with the powers and duties and authorities determined by the directors. So the board's sole official connection with the operations of the organisation and its achievements should be through the CEO. An effective and productive board-CEO relationship is essential if the organisation is to function successfully, and the key ingredients for this relationship are mutual respect for their separate but interdependent roles and responsibilities, mutual agreement on the limits to the freedom granted to the CEO to carry out his or her role, and a fair and ethical process for evaluating CEO effectiveness. Clearly defined delegations, responsibilities and accountability outlined in the delegation register, but ensuring robust debate and a willingness by directors and the CEO to challenge each other and to offer and receive constructive criticism. Ensuring that there's a fair and dignified process for communication and dealings with the CEO by the board and the members, and ensuring the CEO has a right to personal dignity, safety, and ethical position-related dissent, and to an approved and fair internal grievance process. When we talk about unity of control, this is really getting into the area that decisions or instructions of individual directors or officers or committees are not binding on the CEO except in rare circumstances where the board has given one of those directors or a committee or an officer such authority. Decisions or instructions to the board will usually be delivered to the CEO through decisions of the board at board meetings. So individual directors shouldn't be giving the CEO directions individually. However, the CEO is not restricted from using the expert knowledge of individual directors to test ideas out, and that's quite common, and I think it's quite a good thing for CEOs to be able to do that, particularly where you have boards where you have a range of skills and experience, and allow the CEO to test some of those ideas. Paul talked before about reporting. So when we look at reporting communication, the CEO is the primary source of information and communication with the directors. Information will be provided to the directors through board papers, supporting documentation, verbal, written reports, and proposals. It's critical that the CEO does not allow the board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. And we go back to right to the beginning where we just started about what can go wrong. If the board members and the directors feel that they're not getting enough information, they'll go looking for it. The report should not dominate or distract from the board's meeting, and Paul made the point that often the best place for the CEO's report is towards the end of the meeting. It shouldn't be weighed down with operational and administrative trivia. Too often the content of a CEO's report is more about what has happened rather than about what might happen. I guess some of the balances I've seen is that often a good CEO report is about 20% of previous history of what has happened, but about 80% of it is very much strategically focused. The board's responsibility is to direct the organisation, and we don't want them directing that by looking in the rear vision mirror. The CEO's report must provide focus and stimulation for value adding to a discussion that is worthy of both the board and the CEO. The content should speak to governance level concerns. And the CEO will regularly report against the performance measures of the strategic plan. That's really key for board meetings, that the strategic plan is the guiding tool of that discussion. It should be well written and self-explanatory and not thrown together at the last minute. And I like to act on the principle of no surprises. So the directors should receive the report well ahead of the meeting, so they've had a chance to read through it. And if there are issues, they can actually raise those prior, so they actually have some information in advance and be able to I guess, have a good discussion when it comes to the board meeting time. We talked about the delegation register a little while ago. And the part of the delegation is the CEO ensures the budget allows the organisation to operate effectively, and that sponsorships, investments and purchases are within the board's policies. You don't want the CEO going out and making rogue deals that fit outside the board's strategy or the board's policies, and perhaps engaging with organisations who might bring our organisation into disrepute. And the board provides a delegation register. Now, this contains the authorisations for expenditure and purchases, tenders and contracts, staff hiring and salaries. So it puts limits on the amount that the CEO can actually spend in the day-to-day business, what sort of salaries they can be offering staff, the number and positions, and what sort of tenders and contracts at what dollar level they can be entering into. If things are outside that delegation register, the CEO needs to go back to the board to get additional approval. When it comes to reviewing the performance of the CEO, because he or she is so central to success or failure of the organisation, the evaluation by the board is an important component of their responsibilities. Conducting a regular and scheduled evaluation both documents the CEO's achievements, but also identifies possible areas for improvement. Typically, a committee of the board leads this evaluation, so the board would establish a review committee to actually do this, a review and evaluation committee, and they report on the evaluation to the entire board and recommend salary for the next year. Some of those areas for development, I think, are really critical, and they're often things that we tend to forget about, that people are always looking for continuous improvement. And as organisations, we have to make sure we're not just providing opportunities for professional development for our staff, but also make sure the CEO has access to those as well. So they're just some of the key things, I guess, where we see the role of the CEO, the important linkages between the CEO and the board, and some of the things that can actually challenge an organisation and the CEO. But we've got a couple of questions for you that we'd like to ask, and we'd like you to send your answers in, and we'll get back to you within the next few days on what we think and how we receive them. But what do you think is the most challenging aspect of being a good CEO? Many people say it can be a very lonely position. Often there's someone that's stuck between the board and the management team. Often they don't have someone to talk to and bounce their ideas about. But have a think about what you think is the most challenging aspect of being a good CEO, and how would you help solve this problem? So let us know your answers, and we'll look forward to getting your feedback. But thank you for today.